Welcome to part 2 of the build, customizing the Wing Gundam. Now if you remember the end of part 1, I explained I was taking photos of the uncustomized aerial mode because I knew once my customizations were complete, it would be unable to transform. So I would like to start by explaining what I was thinking going into this and why I already knew I would make alterations that would prevent transformation. Now, before I say why, I just want to preface this by saying a few things. First, I really love the Wing Gundam. It's one of my favorites. Second, I enjoyed building and customizing it. And third, if I knew what I do now before I got the kit, I would not have bought it. I don't say that lightly either, as this is the only kit I've said this about. But in my opinion, it has an unforgivable design flaw that honestly makes me pretty mad at Bandai. Now to be clear, I'm not mad at this model for being a lower quality master grade. This kit came out 20 years ago in March 2004. For those of you who don't understand why what year it came out matters, let me explain. When it comes to Gunpla, as a general rule of thumb, the older the model, the lower its quality, and the more recent, the better the quality. It's why people will ask for redesigns of older models. And unlike some other hobbies or toys where a redesign is almost the same as the original, when it comes to Gunpla, every redesign I've seen has been a noticeable improvement over the previous one, even to a casual observer. Well, every redesign except for the RX-78-2, which for those of you who don't know, is the first original Gundam. They have a redesign or variant of that one, like every 2 to 3 years. Anyway, when you get a Gunpla model this old, you can expect it to have issues, and I knew that going in. No, what upsets me about this kit is you cannot get it to hold the Buster Rifle. And for those of you who don't know, it is the iconic weapon of the Wing Gundam. This would be like if a Captain America toy showed all these cool poses of him holding the Captain America shield he comes with. But when you take it out of the box, it's impossible to attach the shield. Like, I don't care if he looks like a repurposed Ken doll, you've got to make it so you can attach the shield somehow. And what's infuriating is they clearly didn't even attempt to make the Buster Rifle holdable when they easily could have. Look, the hand isn't made to hold the rifle, and there isn't even anything to clip into to hold it in place. Now, even beyond that, if you just go to the other arm, the shield has an attachment that lets you clip it onto the arm. Why the heck did they not do that for the Buster Rifle? I am fine if the model isn't perfect, but the iconic Gundam has got to be able to hold his iconic weapon. Now, I know I'll show pictures of him holding the rifle, so I'll quickly go over the 3 ways that's possible. 1, you prop it across his chest and use both arms to hold it up, which is not ever how he actually holds it. 2, either the butt or the barrel is on the ground and it's just propped, standing up with one hand. 3, the only way for him to hold it up for real is to prop it up with other objects, which I then just edited out. In his final display pose, the only reason he doesn't drop it is because I have a thick wad of sticky tack firmly holding it on the arm. Sorry about that, just had to get it out of my system. Anyway, after building it, I found I had issues with the knees popping out and getting the shoulder armor to stay put. So I decided I would fix the shoulders in place to solve that issue, and I would fuse the loose knees to the bottom legs, not only to fix that issue, but also because I wanted solid design lines going down the legs. Because this was a lower quality kit, I figured it would be the perfect one for me to experiment with. I had gotten some putty, fluorescent paints, and scribing tools, none of which I had really used before, and all of which I wanted to try using. So my basic plan was to use the putty to fill in gaps and try covering seams. Then I would create scribing lines going from the center jewel outward across the Gundam. I'd then go over those scribing lines with fluorescent paint, and hopefully it would make it appear as if power was being carried from the centerpiece throughout the limbs and Gundam. Finally, I would paint over the cheap-looking plastic with better-looking metallic colors. Overall, I learned a lot, but it didn't turn out quite how I expected, and the end result was a bit of a mixed bag. I also didn't think about how this would look on video. And once I edited it, it looked like I was a schizophrenic with ADHD doing a build. Because you have to wait for paint and putty to dry, I bounced around between pieces, putty, painting, scribing, and random tools in no particular order. It makes the video almost impossible to follow coherently, so instead, I am just going to go over each type of customization with some footage and my thoughts on how it went. The next time I customize something, I will plan it out a bit better. Anyway, let's get customizing. So obviously, the first thing you do with any detail customization is take the model apart so you're able to more easily work on individual sections or parts. This went pretty well for the most part. I think I only broke the insert studs on 3 pieces. None of the breaks were visible or joints, and all of them were easily put back in place with Tamiya cement. Also, You saw earlier I had gotten a lot of customizing supplies, but spoiler alert, I end up not even using half of them. Hopefully I will on another build. One item I did get but didn't end up being able to use is a green Gunpla LED light. If you look on screen, that is the box with some batteries. My understanding is these were designed to go into the chest pieces of certain master-grade Gunpla from the 00 series. I had thought I might be able to punch a hole in the front chest piece of the Wing Gundam and then put the LED inside. This was very foolish in retrospect. The LED is much bigger than I thought, maybe the size of a quarter, and there is zero empty space in the chest. To get it to work, I would need to restructure the chest piece entirely, and that is way beyond my skill level. So Gunpla LED was a fail. Moving on to glues, putties, and goo, starting with glues. Or in my case, Tamiya cement. It's pretty simple and obvious, but gluing pieces together makes them less likely to fall apart when you are applying pressure and helps to hold pieces together tightly. When you want to do things like trying to cover up seams, it can also be necessary to glue a piece in as well if, like on screen, you've altered a piece in a way that prevents it from connecting naturally. In this case, I had sawed through the insert stub. Onto putties. So on screen is the putty I used, and I'm not surprised they are selling it at a reduced price because it sucks. In theory, you have a separate yellow and blue strip that is kind of like a thick Play-Doh. You take equal parts of each and then mix them together until you're left with a green ball. You then have 90 minutes to sculpt it in any way you want before it hardens. I ended up having a couple problems with this putty. I was trying to use it to cover over seams, but it was more difficult than you would think, as the putty wasn't very pliable and didn't always want to stick to the plastic. That wasn't too bad, but what was much more of an issue was how obvious it was putty had been used once I painted over it. It left the surface looking lumpy and a little coarse in a way that jumps out at you. I had tried and somewhat failed to sand it smooth as well. If you look at the glass file there that I had just bought and was using for the first time, the putty sticks to and gunks up, ruining whatever sanding tool you use on it. I was not pleased. Finally, because it has trouble sticking to the plastic, any sort of scribing you do through it causes the entire thing to pop off, like right here. In short, I didn't like the putty and don't think I will use it again, especially since I found a far superior alternative, and that leads me to the goo. You don't buy the goo. You make the goo. You need 3 ingredients. First is a small glass container with a sealable lid. Second, grab a used runner from whatever color you are going to use the goo on. In this case here, I'm going to use it on white. Then using your clippers, clip them into about 1/4-inch pieces. It doesn't have to be exact, it just makes things quicker. Anyway, keep filling up your container until it is about 1/3 full. Finally, you are going to take some Tamiya cement and pour it into your glass container until all the plastic pieces are just about completely submerged. If you pour in a little too much Tamiya cement, it's not a big deal. Just add a few more plastic pieces. Once that's done, you seal the container. Wait about a day, and boom, you have the goo. What is da goo? The goo is basically liquid model plastic that you can paint on, and is amazing for disappearing seams, filling gaps and fusing pieces. As I've said before, Tamiya cement is not a super glue. What it does is melt plastic. It comes in contact with, causing pieces to fuse together when it dries, and the plastic hardens. So mixing plastic with Tamiya cement melts the plastic into a liquid. While sealed in the container, it will remain in liquid form. Then if you paint it onto another plastic, the Tamiya will fuse the liquid plastic to it, and once it dries, you'll just be left with seamlessly fused plastic as if it had come from the mold like that. Also, to be clear, it looks pinkish on the screen when I do it because I didn't properly clean my brush after using it with a pink fluorescent. You can see it very clearly turns pink when I mix the brush in. PSA, clean your brushes thoroughly after use. Anyway, I really do suggest you make the goo out of the same color plastic you plan on using it on. The white I just showed you is actually from the later part of the build. Unfortunately for myself, I started out using a gray. The reason is pretty simple. I hadn't used the goo before and already had a container of the gray. The reason I had a gray container of goo is because I had planned on using it on the master grade Phoenix model I built in my last dumpster fire video. If you've seen the video though, you know that build ends up going sideways, so I wasn't able to use it then. At the time I decided to do this, I already planned to paint over everything, so didn't think it would matter. What I didn't realize is even with primer, that gray would show through enough to turn the paint to a darker shade of white. I would then have to add additional coats to make it not visible. Basically just additional wasted time I could have avoided. Still, Dagu worked great. I was able to fill up the holes below the knees and fuse them to the bottom of the leg. It also helped me paint over and erase several scribing mistakes I made. And best of all, since it really does fuse to the plastic, I could scribe over it. To be clear though, it's a little more, I don't know, smooth than the normal plastic, so it has a bit of a different feel to it. What I'm trying to say is you can scribe over it. It's just going to feel a bit different doing so you have to be careful. To sum up, glues, pass, putties, fail, and goo, pass. Onto scribing. For those of you who don't know, scribing is when you cut into the plastic to make your own lines. When done right, this adds additional detail to a model. When done wrong, like I often did, it makes it look cheap or awkward. Take this piece here. I tried using blue Scotch tape to create a straight edge I could cut along. As you can see though, this didn't work at all. Thankfully though, I did have the goo to fill that mistake back in. From there, on this piece, I actually tried using a hacksaw to cut it in two. No, I hadn't gone crazy, but I had been looking up ways to create scribing lines. I unfortunately can't remember which channel showed me this, or I would credit them, but they showed if you cut through a piece entirely, sand down the edges, and then reconnect the two sides, you will get a deep, clean panel line. As I said, I was experimenting on this kit, so decided to give it a try. I think it turned out well, but it's a bit hard to tell, both because the off-color goo is there, and because I then painted the edges with fluorescent paint before cementing them in place together. Ultimately, this is something I'll want to try again on another model before I give out a final verdict on it. I have further learned that there is quite a bit of skill and patience involved in panel lining. You really need to carefully set things up and proceed slowly with a steady hand. I don't have patience or steady hands, however, which is why so many of my lines ended up crooked, and I stabbed myself several times like here. As far as setting up the lines, I tried several things. I tried scribing along a metal ruler. I tried cutting a starting line with an X-Acto knife. I tried using masking tape several times. I tried just straight up eyeballing it. I tried whatever kind of tape these little white strips are. I tried using a pen, a pencil, and a hacksaw. I tried using Scotch tape. I tried a lot of things. I also tried a few different tools. I already mentioned the X-Acto knife and hacksaw, but I also tried the traditional scribing tool, which is basically just a curved knife that comes to a sharp point. You put the point on the plastic and slowly drag the blade towards you, scraping away plastic. In order not to create jagged lines, you are supposed to do several light, shallow passes. This isn't a smooth feeling, though. It sort of feels like nails on a chalkboard if I had to describe it. Not the sound, but the scraping sensation. However, the tool I use the most is, well, I don't know the name for it, but basically a push scriber. It essentially works like a chisel, except it has an incredibly sharp point, and since you are carving into plastic, you don't need a hammer. You are also supposed to go lightly and do several shallow passes. I learned the hard way that if you don't, it can tear away plastic from outside the line, leaving you with a very rough and uneven cut. The advantage to this over the traditional scriber is you can change out the head, putting in wider bits and allowing for thicker lines. Since I was going to fill the lines with fluorescent paint, I wanted them extra thick so they could stand out. To sum up, I would say my inexperience caused a lot of rough and uneven lines. It's not the worst looking thing in the world, but they are nowhere near clean enough for me to be happy with them. I did learn a lot though, and believe I can do better next time. First, I don't think I will ever try and scribe over a curved surface again. I just find it too difficult to cleanly lay out or make any lines. I also think I will use the push scriber far more sparingly from now, only for very short, thick lines. This is because it pulls away strips, and you can't effectively do a long strip without the scriber catching and stopping. When you pull the strip away, then it has a tendency to pull away plastic from outside the line as well. It's difficult to avoid this even with shallow passes. I think I may be able to do well with the regular scriber if I can find something that draws well on the plastic. Is on a flat surface, I tape along the line with Scotch tape, and I go slowly with several light passes. When it comes to the scribers and hacksaw, I don't really feel they deserve a pass or a fail. That's because while they didn't work the way I intended, I also don't think I was using them in the proper places and ways they should be. So for now, I'm going to mark them all undecided. Moving on to custom colors using spray paints. And yes, I realize spray paints are inadequate when compared to an airbrush. But good news, you only have to suffer through watching me use them for one more build after this. I did in fact break down and finally buy an airbrush, and good heavens, it is truly so much better. After the initial cost of equipment, it's turning out to be cheaper as well. I can say this for sure because I track every single expense for this channel. I'm a little obsessive like that. If anyone wants me to do a video further breaking it down for them, let me know in the comments. I will miss one thing about using spray paints, and that's how it sounds after speeding up the video when I shake the can. Here, take a listen for a few seconds. It's like a soothing rattlesnake. And then there's the things I won't miss. primarily spray painting in my garage, among many reasons for this. One reason is I have never been able to figure out how to fix my garage light. This means the only light I have is my garage door light, which turns itself off after a couple minutes. So to avoid being left in the dark, I have to periodically open and close the garage door. This always made me feel rushed, so I'm glad to be done with that now. Anyway, since I wanted to play around with the fluorescent paints, I decided not to do anything too fancy for the main paint job. I did try and do a little more for the Buster rifle, which I'll cover in a minute, but for the most part I kept the color scheme. I just wanted it to look less like cheap plastic, so I kept the same white color for white. I think the color is literally called MS White. For the blue, I used a light blue metallic paint. For the red, I used a metallic red on everything except some red parts on the wings I decided I wanted to paint over with fluorescence. Now this brings me to my two least favorite colors on a model kit. I don't like them because I think the color makes the model look very toyish. Now I realize at the end of the day, it is a toy, so let me explain. You know how on toy guns they always put that bright orange plastic cap on the end of the barrel? They do that because some of the toys ended up looking so good, people were mistaking them for the real thing. But that bright orange cap immediately destroys the illusion, so much so you could put that cap on a real gun and suddenly people would think it's a toy. Well, with my model kits, I want that illusion that it could be real, except this yellow color always screams cheap plastic toy to me. Maybe it's just me, but I hate this yellow. That's why I've replaced that yellow with a gold on every build I've done on this channel. I'd be curious to see in the comments if anyone else feels this way, or if it's just me. Now the next color isn't as bad, but I'm really not a fan of the light gray they use either. They use it as the joints and hands on a lot of model kits. That still isn't as bad as when they use it for weapons or armor though. I think it looks the worst there. So for the hands and joints, I decided to go with a black. I'm pretty sure I just did primer and a top coat, so nothing fancy there. Since I'd fused the knee to the joint though, I couldn't separate out the knee joint to paint it. Thus, I first painted the joint and then I had to cover it with masking tape when I went back to paint the leg. Now when it came to the Buster rifle, I did things a little differently. First, I did a base coat of gunmetal. Then I took a Sharpie and marked which parts I was going to want to hand paint black. Next I decided I wanted the barrel along the top of the gun to be spray painted fluorescent, either red or pink. I can't remember. I know I wanted red, but I may have only had pink. Regardless, it took me a long time wrapping it up with masking tape in order to do so. Now, if I'm remembering correctly, the reason I did this, instead of just hand painting on the fluorescent color, was because when hand painting, you needed to put the fluorescent paint on super thick for it to remain a solid color. Too thick, by my estimation, to fit on top of the thin barrel without dripping off on the sides. So for a smooth, solid color, I needed to use a spray. Once that was done, to hand paint on the black, I believe I used Mr. Color's Tire Black. And holy moly, this stuff smelled ripe. And just to clarify, I hand painted this portion because I deemed it too complicated for me to be able to properly cover all the small detailed parts I would need to with masking tape. Now, even though I wasn't using an airbrush, I'm still going to give the main paint job a passing grade. I honestly feel it turned out the best out of everything I tried. However, the hand-painted black tire on the Buster rifle, I'm going to have to fail. It looks passably fine at a distance, but up close it's uneven and looks cheap. And with that, we move on to the fluorescent paints. So I used a mix of spray cans and hand paints. I already somewhat explained that I used a red fluorescent spray can on the top part of the Buster rifle, but I also used it all around on the end piece of the gun. Honestly, I was a bit disappointed. As soon as the paint dried, cracks formed in the paint. I didn't really like its shade of red either, in person. It kind of looks like a muted, light red. As for the fluorescent glow under the black light, it was passable. It had a decent glow, but I wouldn't say it really popped like some other colors. The only other spray can fluorescent I used then was green. Since I only had small pieces I wanted green, I was comparing it to the hand paint, trying to decide if I should even use it. For context, the centerpiece is designed to have a reflective green sticker put on it, and then on top you attach a clear plastic piece. This is a cheap way to give it a green glass-like appearance without actually having to create a transparent green piece. Anyway, after some testing and holding the clear piece up to the different fluorescent greens, I decided I liked the spray can green the most. It was slightly darker and glowed more vibrantly under the black light, in my opinion, and I really wanted the center chest piece to glow as brightly as possible. So I put it over a white primer, and honestly couldn't have been happier with the result. I think this part ended up looking really cool. Oh, nearly forgot. I also used it on the beam sword. That way it would pop as well under the black light. Onto the hand paints. So I used Green Stuff World's fluorescent color set. You should be able to see the box on screen. These paints can also be used in an airbrush and I've done a full review of the entire set using an airbrush. If the review hasn't already been posted, it should be in the next few weeks. I also used a few colors from Tester's fluorescent set. I'm not sure if they can be used in an airbrush, and I haven't done a review of them, nor am I planning to. I also want to point out the handheld blacklight I'm using to check the fluorescent glows throughout here is from Green Stuff World and is called the Torch. I should also have a short review of it up soon, if it's not up already. As you can see, it's pretty easy to hold in one hand, so I really like it for stuff like this. As for when I'm using it without my hands, well, I'll leave it to your imagination. This video is starting to go long, so I'm going to try and quickly power through the rest. So first, green. It's a great fluorescent color and always shines brightly. I also think it looks the best under normal light. Now, even if you're not doing a lot of fluorescence, just a small touch, like doing the eyes, can make things look so much better. I also like using it for weapon lights and such. On to blue. Blue sucks. Out of all the colors I used on this build, it easily has the weakest glow. It doesn't pop at all, and if you don't have a strong black light, the smaller applications will be hard to see at all. I only use blue on top of blue here. Next is pink. And I really like pink under the black light. In my experience, pink and green seem to be the two fluorescent colors that glow the brightest. And since I was playing with fluorescence, I wanted a bright one, which is why I chose to use it over the white. The thing is, it really clashes with the Wing Gundam's color scheme under normal light. And well, I have it displayed under normal light. So it bugs me that it looks a bit tacky up on my shelf with the other models. If I could change one thing about this build, I think I would have gone with the red fluorescent over the white instead of the pink. On to red. Red is, for lack of a better word, average. It's good enough to get the job done, but it's not really going to wow anyone either. So I used red on red. I also used some of the hand paint to touch up what I did with the red spray paint on the Buster rifle. Now I also painted some of the weapon canisters that attach to the Buster rifle red as well. And finally, when it comes to the wings, I actually did not do red on red. Instead, since the red pieces were smaller, I decided I was going to fully paint those a fluorescent red. I therefore used a pink primer and then painted over it. Unfortunately, it didn't go too well. In order to get a solid layer, I had to paint on several layers. And since the paint really thickly bunched up in some spots, you can see I had to cut off that extra paint here. Overall, when it comes to the fluorescence, I have mixed feelings. For this reason, I think I am going to give it a pass and a fail. As for what passes and what fails, I think it is heavily dependent on color, as well as if it is or isn't under the black light. For example, I would pass the green, but fail the blue. So until the collage at the end starts, the remainder of the video is some minor panel lining I did on the head, the saber hilts, as well as me putting the model back together after customization and some top coating. If you've watched this far, I really do thank you. I know this isn't the highest quality video or anything incredible when it comes to customization, but I am still learning, and I did put a huge amount of work into this video. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I promise to keep getting better and working on the quality. If you leave a like or a comment, I'd really appreciate it. Cheers.
In the distant future, mankind has reached the stars, but the galaxy is troubled.
What do you think you're doing? Don't fire!
The Earthsphere Alliance rules the outlying colonies with an iron fist.
I'm sure God would understand the steps we're taking.
Isn't it about time you people realized the ones posing the most threat are none other than yourselves? We've had enough!
Those who oppose them
We won't be needing you any further.
What?
die. Battles are waged with mobile suits, the key to military dominance. The only hope for the colonies, 5 elite soldiers and their legendary mobile suits called Gundams.
There will be a day when the Gundams will save us all.
What this is war.
All of you are very mistaken, and the Gundams will soon come to rectify your mistakes.
Silence!
Now, these pilots will shake the foundations of the Alliance and change the course of history.
You saw I was a kid and you underestimated me. Shouldn't be fighting at all!
If they can stay alive.
Those Gundam pilots are desperate. They'll battle even if it means forfeiting their lives. Mission accepted.
It's a Gundam! Enemy attack!
I'll eliminate all obstacles.
Just who are you anyway?
Say goodbye.
Get all mobile suits ready for combat at once! Fight! Catch you!
Don't die on me!
From the Gundam Universe, a new chapter in one of the greatest anime sagas of all time. Gundam Wing. Weekdays at 5:30. Suit up.
Those who have laid eyes on a Gundam shall not live to tell about it.
Only Toonami.